The state trooper told me they couldn't find any record of a truck matching my description. No tire tracks, no broken branches, no camera footage. He said maybe I'd imagined it, or maybe I was just tired after driving all night. But he didn't explain the blood on the side of my car. And he didn't explain why, for 3 miles, someone had been driving behind me with their headlights off. I drive long distances for work. I'm not a trucker, not anything dramatic like that. I deliver specialized equipment to small hospitals and clinics, places most people never think about until they need them. Defibrillators, portable imaging units, things like that. The kind of job where you spend more time on the road than at home, and you learn to measure your life in exits and rest stops. I was 56 at the time, and I'd done this route more times than I could count. Western Kansas into eastern Colorado. Flat land, empty sky, and long stretches where the radio gives up before you do. I liked those parts. They gave you time to think. Or not think. Sometimes that's better. That night, I was behind schedule. A clinic outside a small town near the border had called with an emergency. Their backup unit had failed, and a storm was coming in. They needed the replacement before morning. I'd already been driving for 10 hours, and I told myself I'd push a little longer, drop the equipment, then find a motel. That was the plan. By the time the sun went down, the wind had picked up. Not a storm yet, but that restless, uneasy wind that moves across open land like it's searching for something. The kind that makes road signs hum and your car rock just enough to keep you alert. Around 9:30 p.m. I realized I hadn't seen another car in a while. That's not unusual out there, but it was quiet in a way that felt intentional. Even the occasional semi was gone. Just me, my headlights, and a ribbon of asphalt cutting through darkness. Then I saw the taillights. 2 dull red dots far ahead, barely visible. A truck, I assumed. Probably a farm truck heading back from somewhere it shouldn't have been at that hour. I felt a small, irrational sense of relief. Another human presence, even if I never caught up to them. Except, I didn't. I drove for 10 minutes at a steady speed and never got any closer. That should have been my first warning. The road was straight, flat. You could see for miles. If the truck ahead was moving slower than me, I should have gained on it. If it was faster, it should have disappeared over the horizon. Did neither. The distance between us stayed exactly the same. I told myself it was just perspective, or fatigue, or that my eyes were playing tricks on me. So I turned up the radio and focused on the road. 5 minutes later, the radio cut to static. That happens out there too. But the timing felt off, like the silence had weight to it. That's when the truck's taillights went out. Not gradually, not like they turned off a side road. They just vanished. 1 second they were there. The next, the road ahead was empty. I slowed down without really thinking about it, my foot easing off the gas. My eyes strained to pick up any shape, any reflection, any sign that the truck had turned off or pulled over. Nothing. I told myself I must have crested a slight rise and lost sight of it. But the road was flat. I knew that stretch well. There were no hills there, no turnoffs for miles. Still, I kept driving. About 3 minutes later, my headlights caught something reflective in my rearview mirror. 2 white points. Headlights. Behind me. At first, I felt that same small relief again. Another car. Another person. But then I noticed something strange. They weren't getting any closer. Just like before, the distance stayed perfectly the same. I sped up a little. They matched me. I slowed down. They stayed right where they were. That's when I realized something else. Their headlights were wrong. Too dim. And too low. Like they were either partially covered or not fully on. They didn't throw light onto the road the way headlights should. They just existed as 2 pale shapes in the dark. I checked my mirrors. Both side mirrors showed the same thing. A vehicle behind me, sitting at an exact, unchanging distance. Okay, I said out loud, because silence was starting to get to me. Okay. I told myself it was probably a farm truck with faulty lights, or someone messing with their brights. Or maybe I was just more tired than I thought. Then I noticed the road signs. They were still coming, but fewer of them, and the ones that did appear looked old. faded, like they hadn't been replaced in decades. I was sure I was still on the right highway. My GPS said I was, but the world outside my windshield didn't match what I remembered. The wind picked up again, pushing against the side of my van. And for a moment my headlights flickered. Just a moment. But in that moment, I lost sight of the road. And when the lights steadied again, the truck was closer. Much closer. Close enough now that I could see the shape of it. It was a pickup. Older model. Boxy. Dark color. No visible markings. And still those dim, wrong headlights. I couldn't see the driver. The windows were black. Not tinted. Just black. Like the inside was swallowing light. My heart started to hammer in my chest. And I realized my hands were tight on the steering wheel, my knuckles aching. I told myself to just keep going. There was a rest stop about 20 miles ahead. I could pull in there. There would be lights, cameras, maybe other cars. The truck stayed with me. Exactly the same distance. For 5 miles. Then 10. Then 15. It never tried to pass me. Never fell back. Never got close enough for me to read a plate. It just stayed. I tried calling the state highway patrol. No signal. I tried my dispatch. No signal. My phone showed one bar that flickered and vanished. That's when I started to smell something. At first, I thought it was my imagination. Or maybe something wrong with the engine. But the smell wasn't mechanical. It was coppery. And faintly sweet. Like blood. I glanced at the dashboard. Everything looked normal. The van was running fine. Then I heard something. A sound I felt more than heard. A low, dull thump, like something hitting the side of my vehicle. I looked in the side mirror. There was a dark smear along the lower panel of the van. And something hanging there. I don't know how to describe it without my stomach turning even now. It looked like fabric. Or maybe plastic. Torn and fluttering in the wind. Caught on something underneath. Another thump. The steering wheel pulled slightly to the right. I fought it. My heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. That's when the truck's headlights changed. They got brighter. Not fully. But enough that I could see the front of the truck now. And something else. The front bumper was damaged, bent, and dark. I realized with a sick, cold clarity that whatever I had hit or whatever had hit me had come from that truck. I didn't remember hitting anything. But something had. I pressed the gas. The van protested, but it started to pick up speed. The truck did too. Still behind me. Still the same distance. The road ahead suddenly dipped slightly, and for just a second, my headlights caught something in the road. Something lying across the lane I had just been in. Long, unnaturally long. I swerved without thinking, my tires screaming in protest. In the mirror, I saw the truck go straight over it. No hesitation. No slowing down. Just a dull, heavy bounce as it passed over whatever was there. Then the truck started to get closer. Not matching my speed anymore. Closing the gap. My chest felt tight, like there wasn't enough air in the van. I pushed harder on the gas. The engine whined. The truck kept coming. That's when I saw the rest stop sign. 2 miles. 1.5. The truck was close enough now that I could see details in its grille. Something was stuck there. Something dark. Something that moved when the wind hit it. I don't remember screaming, but my throat hurt afterward. I crossed into the rest stop at speed I probably shouldn't have, tires skidding slightly as I took the exit. The lights of the rest area flooded over me like a blessing. For a split second, I thought it was over. Then I realized something. The truck didn't follow me in. It stayed on the highway, but it didn't keep going forward either. It slowed and stopped right at the edge of the exit, blocking it, sitting there in the dark, just beyond the reach of the lights. I didn't wait to see what it would do next. I pulled into the first parking spot I saw, jumped out, and ran toward the building, shouting for help like a man half my age. There were 2 other cars there, a tired-looking couple and a lone trucker. They stared at me like I was out of my mind. Maybe I was. We all looked back toward the highway. The truck was gone. State troopers came later. They looked at the smear on my van. They looked at the torn something hanging underneath. They took pictures. They made calls. In the end, they told me they couldn't find anything on the road. No debris. No signs of an accident. No reports. They suggested maybe I'd hit an animal. But animals don't come from the front of another vehicle. And they don't leave fabric behind. And they don't explain why, for 3 miles, something followed me with its headlights off, and never once tried to pass. The woman at the sheriff's office asked me to point to the town on a map. When I couldn't, she exchanged a look with the deputy and said, "That's not possible." But I still had the receipt from the diner, and it had a name printed on it. I retired early, 58. Not rich, not poor, just tired of watching the years go by from behind a desk. My wife had passed a few years earlier, and the house felt too quiet after that. So I did what a lot of people my age do when they don't know what else to do. I bought an RV. Nothing fancy. Just something reliable enough to carry me from one end of the country to the other without falling apart. I told my kids I was going to see America before my knees gave out completely. They laughed, but they were supportive. Or at least polite about it. The first few months were exactly what you'd expect. Tourist traps, national parks, diners with too much grease and not enough coffee. I kept a little notebook where I wrote down the names of places I liked and the ones I wouldn't go back to. The problem started in northern Nevada. I'd been heading toward Idaho, taking a slower route because I wasn't in any hurry. The day had been long and dull, the kind of drive where the landscape barely changes and you start measuring time by how often you need to stop and stretch your legs. Around sunset, my fuel gauge dropped lower than I liked. I checked my GPS. The next marked town was still over 60 miles away. Normally, that wouldn't bother me, but I'd learned not to gamble with gas in places where middle of nowhere wasn't just an expression. Then I saw the sign. Not a highway sign, just a small, hand-painted one on a wooden post near a turnoff. Carver's Gap, 12 miles. Gas, food rooms. It looked old. The paint was chipped. The letters were uneven. But it was there, and 12 miles was better than 60. I checked my GPS again. It didn't show anything there. No town, no services, no road. I told myself it was probably just outdated data. So I turned off. The road narrowed almost immediately, from a 2-lane highway to a single, cracked strip of asphalt. No lines. No reflectors. Just my headlights and a road that seemed to be slowly dissolving back into desert. 10 minutes in, I started to feel uneasy. Not scared. Just aware. The kind of awareness you get when you realize you haven't seen another car or a house or even a fence in a long time. The radio lost its signal. Then my GPS did something strange. It didn't just say recalculating. The screen froze, flickered, and then went blank. I considered turning back. But I was already more than halfway to where the sign said the town should be, and my fuel gauge was still dropping. So I kept going. The road dipped between low, dark hills, and suddenly, there were lights ahead. A cluster of them. Warm and yellow, scattered like someone had dropped a handful of stars onto the ground. Relief washed over me. Carver's Gap. The town turned out to be small. Smaller than I expected. One main street, maybe a dozen buildings. A gas station. A diner. What looked like a motel. A hardware store. And a few houses set back in the dark. Everything looked old. Not abandoned. Just untouched by time. The gas station pumps were the kind I remembered from my childhood. The diner sign flickered. The windows in the buildings glowed softly, but I didn't see anyone walking around. I pulled into the gas station and shut off the engine. The silence was immediate and heavy. No traffic. No distant highway noise. Just the soft ticking of my engine cooling and the faint hum of electricity. I stepped out and started filling the tank. That's when I noticed something else. There were cars there. 3 of them. All parked. All empty. They weren't wrecks. They weren't old. 2 looked like they were from the last decade. 1 was a newer SUV with out-of-state plates. All 3 were dusty, like they'd been sitting there for a while, but not abandoned long enough to explain the dust. I looked toward the diner. The lights were on, so I went inside. A bell rang when I opened the door. The sound echoed in a way that made the room feel bigger than it was. There were 4 booths, a counter with 6 stools, a coffee machine behind it, and one woman standing behind the counter, wiping the same spot over and over with a rag. She looked up and smiled. "Evening," she said. "You're just in time." "For what?" I asked. "For dinner. We close early." Her voice was friendly, normal, but there was something about the way she said "we" that made me glance around. There was no one else there. I sat at the counter and ordered something simple. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, coffee. She nodded and went into the back. As I waited, I noticed the bulletin board on the wall. It had a few old flyers pinned to it. Church events, a yard sale from 3 years ago, a notice about a missing dog. The dates were strange. Not wrong, just inconsistent. One flyer was from 1998, another from 2012, another from last year. It was like time in this place had gotten mixed up. My food came out and it was good. Better than good. Homemade. The kind of meal that tastes like someone actually cares whether you enjoy it. "Busy night?" I asked, trying to make small talk. She smiled again. "Not really. We don't get many new faces." Something about that made my skin prickle. "Where is everyone?" I asked. She hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. "Turned in early," she said. "Long days around here." I ate, paid, and asked about a room. She pointed across the street to the motel. "Tell Mr. Hale you're staying 1 night," she said. "He'll give you the traveler's rate." The motel looked even older up close. The sign buzzed softly. The office light was on. Inside, a thin man with gray hair and tired eyes handed me a key without much conversation. "Room 3, he said. "Checkout is before 9. I noticed there was no computer, no credit card machine. I paid cash. As I turned to leave, I asked him, "What's the best way back to the highway in the morning?" He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "The same way you came in." Something in his tone told me not to ask any more questions. The room was clean, simple, the kind of place that hasn't changed in decades but still gets by. I lay down, but sleep didn't come easily. The town was too quiet, not peaceful, just empty, like a stage after the actors have left. Sometime after midnight, I heard a sound outside. Footsteps. I got up and looked through the curtain. Someone was walking across the parking lot. A man. He moved slowly, like he was tired. Or hurt. He stopped near one of the parked cars, the newer SUV, and stood there for a long time. Then he opened the driver's door, and just stared inside. He didn't get in. He didn't take anything. He just stood there. After a minute, he closed the door and walked out of the light, disappearing between the buildings. I told myself it was just a local, or maybe another traveler. Still, I didn't sleep much after that. In the morning, I checked out early. The man at the desk barely looked at me. I loaded up the RV and drove back the way I'd come. Only something was wrong. The road didn't look the same. Not dramatically different. Just off. The turns didn't line up with what I remembered. The hills seemed closer together. The distance felt longer. After 20 minutes, my fuel gauge started dropping faster than it should have. I checked my GPS. It was working again. But it didn't show Carver's Gap. And it didn't show the road I was on. It showed me driving through empty space. My stomach tightened. I kept going until the low fuel light came on. Then, finally, I saw the highway. I pulled onto it and didn't stop until I reached the next real town. At a diner there, I asked the waitress about Carver's Gap. She frowned. Never heard of it. At the gas station, the clerk hadn't either. So I went to the sheriff's office. That's where they asked me to show it on a map. And that's where they told me there was no town there. I showed them the receipt from the diner. They looked at it like it was a joke. The name of the place was printed at the top. Carver's Gap Diner. The address line was blank. They sent a deputy out to check. He came back an hour later and said there was nothing there. Just an old, broken road that ended in the desert. No buildings. No lights. No town. They suggested maybe I'd taken a wrong turn. Or maybe I'd dreamed it. but I still had the key from the motel. And when I checked my RV later, I found dust on the side that hadn't been there before. And sometimes, when I think about that night, I remember the way that man stood by the SUV. Like he was trying to decide whether to leave, or whether he was already too late. The detective asked me one question I still don't know how to answer. "If you were asleep," he said, "who was driving your car at 2:17 a.m.?" Because my phone says I was in two places at once. I'm not the kind of person who believes in glitches in reality. I'm 62 years old, retired from 35 years in municipal maintenance, and my life has always made sense in a very simple way. Things either work or they break. If something strange happens, there's usually a reason, even if you don't know it yet. That's what I believed before last October. My wife and I had driven down to visit our daughter in Arizona. She just had her first kid, and we were doing the grandparent thing, bringing too many gifts and pretending we weren't exhausted by the heat. On the way back, we decided to take it slow. 2 days instead of one long push. We stopped in a small town in southern Utah I'd never heard of before. Not a tourist place. Just one of those towns you find by looking for a motel sign when you're too tired to keep going. The motel was cheap, clean, and forgettable. The kind of place that exists so you can sleep and leave. We checked in around 8 p.m. Ate sandwiches from a gas station across the street. Watched bad TV until we couldn't keep our eyes open anymore. I remember setting my phone on the nightstand and plugging it in. I remember falling asleep. What I don't remember is waking up. According to my phone, I did. At 2:03 a.m. My location history shows my phone leaving the motel. At 2:05, it shows me driving south. At 2:17, it shows my phone stopped on a stretch of road about 11 miles outside town. At 2:19, it shows my phone moving again. At 2:34, it shows my phone returning to the motel. At 7:12 a.m., my alarm went off. I woke up in the same bed, in the same room with my wife still asleep next to me. The car was in the same parking spot. At first, I didn't notice anything wrong. We packed up, checked out, and got back on the road. It wasn't until we stopped for gas that I saw it. There was mud on the side of the car. Not road dust. Not splatter from a puddle. Thick, dark mud, smeared along the lower panel and the wheel well. "That's weird," my wife said. "Did you drive through something last night?" "No," I said. "We didn't go anywhere." She looked at me for a second. "Are you sure?" "Of course I'm sure." But the question stuck with me. When we got back on the road, my phone buzzed with a notification. A missed call. From my own number. I stared at it, waiting for the joke to make sense. Didn't. I tapped into the call log. It showed an outgoing call at 2:18 a.m. Duration, 46 seconds. To my wife's phone. She checked her phone. She had a missed call at the same time. From me. Neither of us had heard it ring. Neither of us had answered it. I laughed it off at first. Some kind of glitch. Phones do weird things sometimes. But then I checked my location history. And that's when I saw the trip. I showed it to my wife. She didn't laugh. "Did you go for a drive while I was asleep?" she asked. "No," I said. "I swear I didn't." "Could you have sleepwalked?" "I've never done that in my life." We drove in silence for a while after that. The road it showed, it wasn't on our route. It was a narrow, rural road that cut away from the highway and went into an area marked mostly as empty land. I told myself it had to be wrong. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. About an hour later, I took an exit and drove toward where the phone said I'd stopped. The landscape changed slowly. Fewer houses, more open space, low hills and patches of scrub. Eventually, the road narrowed, and then it turned to gravel. The place where my phone said I'd stopped was nothing. Just a wide spot on the side of the road. No building, no sign, no reason to stop there. Except for one thing. There were tire tracks in the mud beside the road. Fresh ones. Leading off into a shallow dip behind a line of trees. My stomach tightened. "Let's go," my wife said. "This is stupid." She was right. I should have listened. But instead I pulled over. The ground was soft from recent rain. The mud was thick and dark, just like what was on the side of my car. The tracks led down into a low area and stopped near a stand of trees. That's where I saw it. Piece of plastic. Clear. Like part of a broken headlight cover. It was on the ground, half pressed into the mud. It didn't look old. It looked recent. I bent down and picked it up. Fit my car. Perfectly. My heart started to pound, slow and heavy. "Get back in the car," my wife said. Her voice was tight. "Now." I did. We drove back to the highway in silence. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. 3 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a detective from a county sheriff's office. He asked if I owned a dark sedan with my license plate number. I said yes. He asked where I was on October 14th, between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. I told him I was asleep in a motel. He didn't argue. He just said, "Your car was seen on a rural road outside town around that time." Seen by who? I asked. He didn't answer that. He asked if I'd noticed any damage. I told him about the plastic. There was a pause on the line. Then he said, "We found something on that road, and your car may have been involved." My mouth went dry. Involved in what? Another pause. An incident. They asked me to come in. We drove back the next day. At the station, they showed me a photo. It was blurry, taken at night, but I recognized my car immediately. It was on that same gravel road. And the timestamp said 2:17 a.m. I asked them who took the picture. They said it came from a trail camera, one used by a rancher to monitor wildlife. The camera had been damaged, hit by something. They asked me again if I'd been driving. I told them no. They believed me, or at least they said they did. "What was the incident?" my wife asked. The detective looked tired. "Someone called 911 from that area around 2:20 a.m. he said. The call was strange, mostly breathing, and a voice saying, "I'm still here." Then the line went dead. My chest felt tight. They never found the caller. They never found anyone else there. But they did find signs that a car had gone off the road and come back up. And they did find a broken piece of plastic. They kept it. They let us go. On the drive home, neither of us talked much. That night, in our own bed, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m. my phone buzzed. A missed call. From my own number. I didn't check the log. I turned the phone face down and left it there. Because I already knew what time it would say the call happened.